G'day, ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today, we're going to have a little discussion about the good old German tank teams. Now, for those of you who don't know, or aren't tankers, or haven't played a lot, or haven't been veterans, or whatever, come, gather round by the fire. We'll have a little bit of a story time. So, we're going to take it back to about 2016, where the T-29 was just introduced. And it was a monster, simply because no one knew how to fight it yet. But we didn't know that at the time. Well, most people didn't know that. I personally argued viciously that it was not overpowered, and that it was, in fact, tiered correctly. And a couple of years down the track, we can see from, for example, the Thunderskill statistics that they are about in the same ballpark. The T-34, which is the standard tree version of the T-29, having a win rate of about 50-odd%, and the King Tiger Henschel, which is at the same battle rating, having a win rate of about 48%. Not only that, but the kill-death ratios are roughly the same. I believe the King Tiger actually has a slightly higher one. But we're going to be talking today about why German teams are so famed for being terrible. Now, I think what we're going to do is we're going to start by setting up a theoretical matchmaker. The one in the background is a good place to start. The maximum tier is 6.7 with STR V81s, and I believe we've got some King Tigers on our team, but they're on the other side of the map. We've got my M26 Ariete, and the enemy has a lot of 6.0s, 6.3s, so the matchmaker is fairly balanced in this case. This match, I do extremely well. I get something like 9 kills, but we lose, because the team just plays surprisingly poorly. And we're going to have a look and have a discussion about why that might be the case. And then we're going to talk about what we can do to potentially fix this. Now, let's start off with the match itself. And looking at the map, at the mini-map itself, you can see that the positioning of our team is poor. We haven't dedicated enough numbers to the western side of the map. Everyone has decided to lemming train for this capture point here, where I am. Not only that, but everyone is engaging in brawling matches. You can see a couple of tanks out to the far east, and a couple of tanks sitting on the ridgeline out in the open, in the grid square that is, I believe, I can't actually read that from here. It's the second from the top, on the 3 line. That spot there is extremely vulnerable and extremely open, and you can see there's an STRV that's just using that ridgeline to maximum effectiveness, and it's taking out Panthers, it's taking out Tigers, and these players are just getting swept off their feet. Now, I'm playing slightly smarter, although still in a vulnerable position, and part of me is getting lucky. So, what's actually going on here? Well, our enemy has positioned themselves on the map a lot more, first of all, evenly, and second of all, in a better position overall. They're working that ridge line off to the south of me. You can see that IS-2 there just got killed because you don't peek a ridge line with an IS-2, and you get shafted for that. But our team in general is pushing out into the open, where as Tigers and as Panthers, we should be playing flanking routes and we should be playing ridge lines properly rather than out in the open. And we should also be using certain spots on the map to a lot better effectiveness. There's a little choke point that I've just done a little flank around, and I'm going to get this T-34 and I'm going to retake the cap essentially. But the entirety of the team that has gone down towards that capture point is dead, except for those 3 that are sitting on the ridge, and they're currently brawling off with, I believe, a T26E1 and a Walker Bulldog and an IS-2 or something like that. There's the T26E1, and I finished that one off, but the Allies have just positioned themselves in terrible spots, and that could be to a multitude of things, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So, we know that my team has positioned themselves extremely poorly. This map is perhaps one of the most balanced maps in the whole game, and whilst it's suggested, or it's sometimes called a close quarters map, I don't believe so. It is a map for everyone, and it literally fits every single playstyle. You want to camp the back of the map? There are spots to camp the back of the map. You want to brawl? There are spots to brawl. You want to crest ridgelines? There are ridgelines that you can crest. And there is literally something for everyone in this map. Yet, for some reason, the Allied team seems to be making much better use of that. Now, why is this the case? Well, let's have a look, first of all, at the current matchmaker. The Italians have just been released. Everyone is grinding out their Italians. There are plenty of people in Pershings, and Pershings generally haven't fought tanks like the T-29, the T-34, the STRVs, the Centurions in general. So there are a lot of people that don't actually know how to fight Centurions and fight T-34s with Pershings, for a start. And whilst the gun on the Pershing is slightly better than the Tiger 1s, we can consider them, for this purpose, more or less equivalent. So, we have a matchmaker that's flooded with people grinding premiums. We also have a matchmaker that is flooded with 5.7s. Now, if you look at the enemy team, they have more 6.7s than us. And that's just a factor of the matchmaking. There's not a whole lot that we can do to even that out without jeopardizing queue times. And I understand why Gaijin have made that move, and I understand why they're not going with, for example, what World of Tanks does, where they try and tier teams equally. So you have, for example, 6.7s or 5.7s and equal numbers of both on each teams. It's just not possible with the way, one, lineups work, and two, queue times. And it's not worth splitting up the player base that way. It's unfortunate, but it's something that we have to live with. And unfortunately, and this is probably one of the most interesting points I would have to suggest or bring up, I guess, is that the tanks that people fangirl over and the planes that people fangirl over tend to be the tanks that do slightly poorly. Now, everyone knows the Tiger 1. A lot of people come to War Thunder for the Tiger 1, and they get to their Tiger 1, expect a 5-to-1 kill-death ratio because that's apparently what it had in real life. I won't debate those figures. I'm told that they're inflated, but I'm told that they're the official figures, but honestly, it doesn't matter. The Tiger 1 in real life has legendary status, and in War Thunder it is expected by the player base that it would have legendary status in the game as well. But because the way the matchmaker works, where the matchmaker is based off the performance of individual vehicles in individual battles rather than mass conflicts. So, for example, let's take a situation in Normandy where 3 Tiger 1s are facing off against a platoon of Shermans. The platoon of Shermans will have, say, air support. They'll have tank destroyers. Not only that, but the doctrines that each nation used were radically different. And so you will actually never get equal, balanced, and fair lineups playing a tank historically, or to its historical, to its historical degree, or the way it was meant to be used in real life. Now, in War Thunder, because each tank is based off its individual performance rather than its performance in mass-scale conflict, the matchmaking for the Tiger 1 is significantly more difficult than it was in real life. And so it doesn't have that 5-to-1 kill-death ratio, and so a lot of people do poorly in it because they expect to be blocking shells, they expect to be taking a lot of damage, they expect to have this Wunderwaffe, but all they get is a box with 80mm of armor on each side, or 100mm of armor, and a gun that does 140mm of pen. When they're fully up-tiered, like they are in this case, They're fighting stuff like FV4-202s and Centurions, which can have effectively 250 millimeters of armor. So your gun is never going to penetrate. But if you think about this, a lot of the tanks at 5.7 suffer naturally. And so German teams at between 5.7 and 6.7 will naturally suffer because they're flooded with 5.7 tanks. And that's just the matchmaker. You take your IS-2 into a higher tier match, so a 6.7 match, and you're going to get shafted. I guarantee you, 9 out of 10 times, you are not going to have a great time. And that works the same with the Centurion Mark 1, it works the same with the T-25, and it works the same with every other tank that faces a full up tier at 5.7 without fail. And the problem is, a lot of people go from the Panzer IIIM to 5.7. So they have a jump of something like 3 whole battle ratings, and then they get a tank that they think is going to be absolutely amazing, but turns out to be just decent. And the Tiger 1 and the Tiger E are fairly decent tanks. The issue is, first of all, players don't know how to use them because they have zero experience at 5.7. Secondly, they expect something insane, but get something balanced. Now, there's nothing that you can do about that second point, but the first idea of that battle rating gap, which is so crucial, is probably the main reason why Allied teams used to, and sometimes still do, stomp like that. Not only that, but as soon as you're up-tiered, the Germans have nothing between 6.7 and 7.3 that can really stand up to anything at 7.3 or 7.0. They have the 10.5 King Tiger. Wow, big whoop. And the Jagdtiger, but that's a tank destroyer. It doesn't have the utility that a turreted tank has. There are no tanks at that battle rating with decent speed, decent mobility, decent gun, not no stock grind, but a not as noticeable stock grind, because the Hanomag Henschel is, from what I can tell, an absolute joke. What the German tree needs, ideally, are more tanks between battle ratings 3.3 and 5.7 in the medium or heavy line. I don't know which tanks they could be, but they need them anyway. They also need more tanks between 6.7 and 7.7. Many people have said and suggested to give Germany Leopard prototypes, which I'm all for. They've also suggested certain other tanks, perhaps Swiss tanks, to fill that small battle rating gap. Honestly, I don't care. I just want to see some cool tanks in the game, and I want to see a battle rating gap filled. A lot of people have actually accused me of hating Germany as a nation in the game, or hating Germany overall. It's funny some people say that, actually, because Germany is one of the nations that I play the most. Now, for me, having extra tanks in that area would just be awesome for me. I really, really enjoy playing stuff like the King Tiger, the RU-251. I can't wait to start playing the Jagdpanther and the Ferdinand. They're going to be interesting tanks, and I can tell that. But the problem is they haven't got anything to sort of support that in the battle ratings between. And that's where the problem lies for Germany. That is why the teams are so bad. Because if you get up-tiered, you have no chance. And if you get down-tiered, you either club or get clubbed. So there's no real one way for them. Whereas with, say, the Americans, you have the 76 Shermans. With the Russians, you have the T-34s. You have the KV-85. You also have stuff slightly above it where you've got like the IS-3, you have the IS-6, the BMPs at 7.7. You have options, whereas the Germans don't. And that's what they need. And in fact, I think most nations could do with some extra 7.7 and 8 and lower tanks. I'd really, really like to see a patch where we get stuff like that. And that's one thing that I believe, personally, could make the German teams at these battle ratings a lot better. isn't necessarily to do with the players themselves. Of course, the players are inexperienced because they've gone from Panzer IIIM straight to Tiger H1. But if you give them a couple more tanks in the way, you can really ease that movement into the higher battle ratings, and it'll make it a lot easier for the enemies. It'll make it a lot easier for the Axis to deal with stuff like that. I think it would be a great idea. Let me know in the comments, ladies and gents, which tanks they could add. I have heard stuff like a Panther with a Panzer IV turret. I've heard stuff like Tiger 1 with a long 88 instead. I don't know if these things existed in real life, and if they did, I want them in the game. If not, maybe not. We'll see. But for the most part, what Germany needs is more tanks, and in certain battle ratings. I think, to be honest, a lot of nations in the game do need this, but Germany specifically has needed it for a long, long time. And this was apparent when the IS-6 was added. This was apparent when the T-34 and the T-29 were added. And this was apparent when the RU-251 was added because it filled the gap. The RU-251 was a great measure for those battle ratings. We just need something that can sort of stand up or fill that role of the RU-251 in the regular tree. And I think, say, Hanomag Henschel at 6.3. That would be awesome. I think Leopard prototype with a 90mm gun at 7.3. That would be ideal. I think there are certain tanks that would just fill that role. And whilst that's starting to happen, we've got the M48A2, we've got the Leopard 1, the Panther 2 is now 6.7. So we've got some interesting stuff starting to happen. But I would like to see a slightly more rapid acceleration of the process. And I think that way, I certainly believe that way, we can, pardon the language, but make Germany great again, I guess. I mean, the German tanks have always been great, in my opinion, but the teams have been garbage just because they lack that experience. And by giving them a little bit more experience and giving, I guess, everyone a little bit more experience, adding more tanks at those lower battle ratings, you can really, really flesh out that matchmaker, and it can actually be really, really nice. So, ladies and gents, let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.